Don't have that. Oh, there we go.
Or-
That's not me, but yes, I appreciate whoever's doing it is doing it.
I just hit the record button.
There we go.
Okay. All right, thank you so much. This is the policy committee of the whole. And our mandate is to discuss and make recommendations to the board on all matters related to bylaws, policies, and administrative procedures. We would like to give thanks and acknowledge that the land on which we work and learn are on the shared territories of the Qualicum and Sinawas Nanoose First Nations people. Introductions, I think we all know one another. We have nothing for discussion so far. Does anybody have anything that they wanted to discuss? And for information, number 3, we're going through this agenda very quickly, but for information, administrative procedures to policy 101, projects, tendering, purchase, and disposal. And Ron, that will be you that will be discussing that or informing people.
Okay, right into that then.
Yeah.
Okay, so yes, this is kind of an extension of the conversation. I think Chair Flynn brought up last policy in terms of the tendering openings and the board's inclusion in that process. And so we kind of chatted about, and again, I can't remember if it was offline or online, but anyways, long story short, it is timely to review this. What you've got before you is that there's nothing on the bylaw itself needing to be addressed. The board's work still is about, again, honoring the process of inclusion, but the inclusion in my mind gets dealt with when it comes to, we actually don't have the bylaw in here.
No, it's a policy. No, we just have the policy.
Oh yeah, here it is. Sorry, yeah, the bylaw is in here actually.
Yeah.
So the board bylaw number 1, we kind of made a comment in 8:10.
Hang on, we're not on board bylaw 1. We're on
the admin procedures to the board bylaw. Oh,
No.
okay. Oh, okay, I'll take it
Yeah.
in sequencing. Fair enough.
Yeah.
So the AP itself, all we're doing is really updating it in terms of the decision matrix. So again, just recognizing that costs have gone up and that we're just trying to be reflective of what do we actually and how much money do we spend at certain decision points. And so clearly all I'm doing is just reflecting the decision points being changed to reflect less than 2,000 for purchasing cards, 2,000 to 5,000 verbal quotes, greater than 4,000 written quotes, that kind of nature. And so this is really reflective of what other districts are recognizing, that the cost of things is going up. Therefore, we need to be just reflective of the range that we're asking the decisions to be made in. And then a greater than $100,000, obviously public tender or request for proposals in a public manner. So that's the one change. The other change, this is one that we've had conversations that have come out of the audit reports in terms of are we or are we not using purchase orders? And if we are using purchase orders, the policy should be reflective of that. So we've in my time here, we've been on again, off again in terms of whether or not we do purchase orders. We do it for some things if the supplier requests it. And so when we switched over to Retrieve, we were able to produce an electronic copy that went to suppliers if they requested it, but we didn't really necessarily have any process that that included purchase orders being issued to certain ranges. So keeping the idea that we will still use requisitions, and therefore if purchase orders are requested, we've included language in there that basically speaks to at the request of suppliers or deemed required, purchase orders may be provided as a legally binding agreement, because that's generally what they are. Now that we've, like many districts, now that we've gone down to the purchasing card programs, many of the purchase orders are not needed because we're buying the things on credit cards, for lack of a better. And the P card administratively has a lot of checks and balances within the system by obviously having credit limits, having it pass through a couple of hands before it gets to the purchasing and the sign-offs and that kind of stuff. So we've kept the line into that purchase orders may be requested and submitted. We'll have a further thought in terms of what maybe the thresholds of it are, particularly for operations and maintenance, who are the ones that will be predominantly issuing them. Schools won't issue them because they generally don't buy things greater than $5,000 kind of thing. And if they do buy it in that range, they're usually picking up the phone and talking to educational administrators or myself. So it's really about how is operations and maintenance in their new format or in their new staffing as sort of Phil gets a handle on the administrative supports, how they're going to use it. At least we've kept the language in there that they may be requested and they may be provided. And that's really all the intention is there. That I think is the only thing that was changed in the AP.
Mhm.
Julie, you have a question or a comment?
Yeah. This is an interesting one because I know this is an admin procedure. They usually come to us if there's changes for information purposes only. However, I'm a little concerned about the chart. And I understand, upping from 1,000 to 2,000 to 2. But I'm a little concerned about the bottom figures for the non-advertised tender and when things go to public tender or request for proposals. And that's gone, that one in particular went from 50,000 to 100,000. And I do understand that prices have gone up, but this was visited in just last October, so 6 months ago. And I don't think things have gone up by that much since last October. So I'm just wondering, in terms of transparency, accountability, why is it going up so much for that before it goes to public tender? $100,000 seems
I
like.
think it's more a practical standpoint. We don't generally we don't have a lot of tender stuff. Usually when we have capital tenders, obviously they're within the minor and major capitals aspects. We don't go to tender a heck of a lot for these things. So it's really providing a threshold that we definitely know that we will do a public process. The question is, at what point do you take it to BC bid? And BC bid is the formal tendering process, and we rarely go that route anyways because it's time consuming. And usually we don't have a whole list of suppliers out there that would perform those duty or perform that work. This is, and again, this is looking at what other districts are doing and what other districts are comfortable with doing. Again, I don't believe that this section of it was looked at 6 months ago. So this really isn't about what has changed in 6 months. This is really about what has changed in the last
4 years.
4 years when it was first introduced.
Mm.
Well, I think it was looked at, I think because it's right at the bottom of the admin procedure with the date. So it must have been looked at. And I think I'm coming at it from the perspective of that public accountability and transparency. And, where is our threshold? We ask people to come to our budget meetings and go over the budget. And if we're saying, well, anything less than $100,000, we're just going to sort of do what we want internally. I don't know, that figure kind of concerns me a little bit.
$100,000 doesn't get you much.
No,
Thank,
but it's still public dollars.
thank you, Julie. Elaine,
Yeah, I'm not so concerned with the $100,000 figure. What I, and maybe we don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but I know that one of the things with the track was we really wanted to use some of our community people. I can't remember what we called it. There was a lovely word for it, and Ron will remember and I don't.
Like social engagement.
Social, yeah. Yeah, so is the idea of keeping things local, maybe using some of the people who had stepped up and said, well, we'll do this and that for free. And I'm wondering if, I know there was a discussion at the steering committee around whether we needed to go to public tender or not. And I'm wondering if there's been any update that anybody knows about that one, or perhaps we just want to close this rabbit hole.
No update, but again, we've got our policy. We don't, RDN was asking just for clarity. RDN wants to make sure that if they're going to give the funds through their community works funding, that the tendering process is transparent according to their funding rules. And looking at what they've had, it's no different than what we do as another public institution, RDN, the city of, the town of, we're all a public function. So we all have similar language. So I don't know
Okay.
officially if RDN is really worried about it. They know that we will obviously appeal through their processes also.
Okay, so we don't want to go down that rabbit hole. It's a good one.
Thank you, Elaine. Peter,
Yeah, in regard to going to tender, this isn't a process that is designed to, provide an audience for the public so that they can watchdog us and make sure that we're behaving ourselves. It's not the point entirely. It's to open it up to different kinds of bidders and make it accessible that way. And I'm just wondering, Trustee Austin, if there's another way that you could put that phrasing as opposed to the way that it was stated, doing whatever we want as if there was something untoward going on. I'm uncomfortable with that statement. And I'm wondering if that's what you meant or if you've just misspoke somewhat.
Well, it just concerns me that in the last, from a 6-month time period, we went from 50,000 to 100,000. And though I understand the rising costs of goods and services, I don't think they've gone up that much in the last 6 months. So from my perspective, yes, when you look at that and go, well, we looked at this in October and we seem to think those numbers were okay. Now we think they're not okay, and it's gone up to 100,000. So yeah, in my perspective, I kind of go, well, that's work or projects or tendering that'll, or not even tendering, that's projects or services that will be given out without any sort of public eyes on it. That's my only concern with that. I can see it with the smaller amounts, but that one kind of jumped out at me.
Peter,
Once again, the process doesn't go to tender to put eyes on it, as you put it. We don't need to be watched by the public. We conduct ourselves ethically. That is our job as staff here in a school district. It's to open it up to other bidding. In regard to the comment about the numbers going up, there's a number of costs or thresholds that we have in the school district that have been outdated by 4 or 5, 10 years, even because they haven't been addressed. I don't recall talking about that threshold last year. We may have talked about the AP, we may have talked about the policy, but I don't recall having any kind of discussion about resetting. That's a this year conversation. And my opinion of this is that all these numbers have needed to be addressed for some time. And so we're in catch-up mode. Thank you.
Well, then my response to that would be that may have been a failure with our last go round with this. It should have perhaps been looked at closer then, and I think then that could just be considered a failure to look at that maybe close enough at that point.
thank you, everybody, for your comments. So is there any further discussion? Seeing none, I'm going to move on to number 4, policies potentially going to first reading. Bylaw 1. Oh, somebody was making noise. I thought somebody. Bylaw 1, Board of Education. Oh, sorry, Eve.
Oh, sorry, I can't find my raised button. I keep hitting other things. Just to say, to remind, at the board meeting, this will just be set as for information. We don't need to go into anything further. You could say something to the effect that the policy committee has reviewed and the board is now informed of this administrative procedure amendments, and then you can move on to the next item. It's simply at that point, a note to the minutes. Because we don't rediscuss this again there. Yeah.
No. No, it's just for information.
Elaine, did you have another comment?
No, I'm on board bylaw 1.
Yes, you are.
Mhm.
So you're up.
Okay, so with actually board bylaw 1, I'll just repeat what I said the last time. And you know, we can do with it as we choose. Discussion with regard to electoral areas. Laura's comment regarding the area G, I think Julie spoke to that the last time. Do we want to change the boundaries? And if we want to change the boundaries, we should start the process now. On board evaluation on page 5.
Can we do maybe one at a time of yours, Elaine? Because I think Julie said she'd do some background research on the process of changing.
Sure,
them.
we can do them one at a time. Yeah,
Because I believe that's what she left the meeting thinking she'd take a look at sort of what this would mean to us, because I think it means a
no
lot.
problem.
So, sorry.
And I'm eating, so I'm going off camera.
Okay. Julie,
Yeah, and I did look it up. And I think from my perspective and from my reading of it, I went to, let me get the title of it. Oh, man, now it's like 30 pages up. It's School Trustee Election Procedures in British Columbia. It's a guide for boards of education, administrators, and elected officials. It's a PDF download. I have it here. But basically, for our district, it looks fairly straightforward if this is the direction we want to go. I had it. Let's see, it was right here. It's fairly straightforward because we're not encroaching on another school district. That would be sort of one of the pieces that would make it a little sticky. But we're not doing that. It's basically, we put in a request to sever the one region into 2. And I'm sorry, I had it up here and then I went to look for the title of it. And now it's gone. I was going to read out what it said. Anyway, it's a fairly straightforward process. We just have to put in a request to the ministry, and it goes to the Governor General. We just have to put in a rationale for why we want to do that. We would say we're not encroaching on any other school district territory. And the only other thing that might we have to do is just approach both municipalities, Qualicum and Parksville, and ensure that we can be on each of their ballots. I mean, we've been on their ballots up to now. Again, that would be a relatively simple process because we've already been on their ballots. But now we're saying, well, we just want to put one person with Qualicum or one person with Parksville. So yeah, it was pretty straightforward. So I think now we're just at the point of, is this where do we want to do this or not?
okay, thank you so much. I have a comment. I think that as a district, we should have one electoral area for 5 people running. I think that I still think it's very unfair that Qualicum and Parksville have to have thousands of votes to get in, where other areas only need 50, 100, 35. So I personally would like to see, I don't know if, Julie, if you found any information in there about changing.
You could do that as well. You're not changing the number of trustees. You wouldn't be changing the number of trustees. You would just be changing the boundary lines, basically.
Right. Okay,
And so it's not a huge thing to change the boundary lines, as far as I could read. It makes it bigger if you were dipping into another district or something, but as everything would still be basically the same.
thank you very much for that. Julie, did you have another comment?
No, I'm still looking for this.
Okay, and
Other people can go.
Yeah,
but was there any, now, and possibly it's changed, but there's no comment that we have to sort of put any public community input out there, because I would think, and you're quite into the community input piece here, Julie, you'd have logged in on the fact that I think we would need to put it out for 60 days, 90 days, whatever. I have been part of this, or a gentleman tried to start this when I was first elected, and he was getting signatures. Now, I don't know if it was that, and it could, easily that could have gone by the wayside, but on a recall petition, you need 2/3 of the electoral vote in your area to recall a minister, an elected official. We are elected officials, so what public, us just saying we want it, I don't. Right.
Yeah, no, thanks, Eve. No, I knew there was that public piece. So here's the procedures. We'd have a stated rationale. The rationale should be brought to public attention for discussion and should include appropriate consultation with municipal councils, regional boards, special interest group. All boards of education affected by the proposed boundary change would have to get those public interest groups on side, like via resolutions from their own groups, but we wouldn't be affecting any other school district. So we wouldn't necessarily have to have that thing. The person or board of education requesting the boundary change should then write to the Minister of Education, consider recommending the change to the boundary, and the letter would include the map of the existing one, a map of the proposed one, rationale, the date it would be passed, letters from the affected boards. We wouldn't have that. A request that the Minister of Education consider recommending to the Lieutenant Governor in council, that's it, to alter the district, and an indication of whether or not a transfer of assets would have to happen. So we wouldn't have like a lot of those little pieces. And according to their procedures, we just have to bring the proposal to the we just have to bring the rationale to the public for discussion and include an appropriate consultation with municipal councils, regional boards, special interest group, including consultation discussion with any other board of education whose district boundaries would be altered or affected. It does not say they have to have any sort of referendum or resolution from their groups for that piece.
I
Thank
can definitely see the town, the municipality, and the RDN hopefully writing a letter in agreement with the school district, but I guess it's containing, or in the new words that we have floating around here within the ministry, genuine consultation, in quotes, with the public, what that could amount to. And maybe it's us declaring that 1,000 people attended a public meeting on XYZ date, and there was no discontent rather, and then if people were discontent, they write their letters individually or something, and the flurry of whatever is, and we say we direct that information. If you're staunchly in opposition to this, please direct your letter to the Lieutenant Governor and the Attorney General or whomever or whatever, and then that's how they gauge it. Because at this point, it would be really hard, if there's no threshold, no numbers, nothing to say that this many people have to sign in agreement, then that is pretty open-ended.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
Elaine.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things to be weighed in on. First of all, consultation. Well, we do a consultation process around all our policies and bylaws, and it's a 3-stage process, as we know, and we take it to actually six meetings. We take it out to board, we take it out to our policy meeting of the whole. We could do additional work. I mean, we've got 3.5 years here, or maybe 3 years. So I guess the question that I have is, do we have an appetite to change this? If so, what do we have an appetite to change it to? So I've been doing a lot of walking and thinking about this, and I don't think there's actually an easy, if we decide to do it, I don't think there's an easy answer as to what we want to do, because quite frankly, we don't want to disadvantage our smaller areas and the area that the Area G is huge just in and of itself, and it's very split up. And well, we all know this. I don't have to repeat it. Anyway, I'll disappear and have other people's comments.
Thank you. Peter,
Yeah, we, as I mentioned a few times, we did this in my previous district when, in the time period that Mike McKay was the official trustee. The complication, or the piece that might have made it more complicated, is the change from 9 trustees down to 5 trustees, and then the boundaries within also needed to be changed to adopt that. So it's interesting to note that this going from a ward system to having the entire school district be open may be simpler, and that of course makes this more possible if there's an appetite to move forward. As far as consultation goes, getting people out to events is challenging. The idea of hundreds or thousands of people coming online for this particular topic doesn't seem likely. But if we were to put a very clear rationale in writing, and then send that 2 or 3 times out to stakeholders to gather feedback, that might suffice for feedback for the board to move forward or not, or the government agency that looks after this to approve it or not.
Public notice might also be the answer.
Julie,
Thanks. Personally, just from my perspective, I think it would be certainly worth pursuing at least splitting up the Parksville Qualicum one into 2 separate ones, each represented by 1 trustee. I understand what Carol is saying there, but the reality is, like my rural area has over 8,000 people. Just because they don't vote doesn't mean that, Area F people should be disenfranchised from having somebody running in their area. So it's still a pretty large area. They just don't get out to vote. So, they're more motivated in the urban areas, I guess, for the most part. And that's why you get more people coming out. Barry ran up in Bowser, I forget, there wasn't that many people, but the population up there is still substantial. Just because you don't get the people out doesn't mean that they should be not represented. The problem with having just one big district is we are very much a rural district as well as an urban district. And I would hate to run the risk of just having the board represented by people that live in the urban areas or vice versa. We see how that affects the RDN. It gets skewed, to the urban perspective, just the way that they're structured, and the rural vote, the rural representation does not get a stronger voice. So I would be very concerned about that. But I would certainly be open to looking at splitting Parksville Qualicum into 2 separate entities.
Eve.
Yeah, I'm afraid I'm in Julie's court. I think first past the post won't necessarily give the rural folks as the representation. And you know what, I agree, they don't vote. Only 150 people voted in my area, and I think it's 50 for Barry's. Yeah, it's not the thousands that the city and the town garner for a trustee, but I personally prefer the local representation and allowing local folks to vote for a local person.
Okay. I just have a couple of comments. I worked in a district that was up in the Kootenays that had several areas that were covered. Trustees were elected as a whole and they were divided up. Somebody that lived in Nelson ended up being the trustee for the small town that I lived in. And the fact of the matter is that we are trustees and we represent the whole district. We're here to represent the school district. So I don't think it should matter if, and us as trustees, we do go out to different areas and are on different committees. And so I just feel strongly that we represent the school district. And if you are elected as a trustee, you should be willing to go to bat for the school district as a whole and those areas that you represent. That's my final comment. Elaine, and then we're going to move on.
Okay, well, we might not be ready to move on because we might
No.
need to have yet another piece of this. But I guess what I've been thinking about and you know, I thought about at large. I actually don't agree with at large for the reasons that have been spoken already. But I was wondering about how we would divide up Area G. And I thought, you know what, Craig Bay is as a part of Parksville, right?
Yes,
And then Area G is all around it. I think we have to look a little bit more at where these areas are, and we may, if we have an appetite to make the changes, we might want to sit down with a map and go, okay, well, it makes sense, for example, to split Parksville in a different way and to move Craig Bay into Nanoose area, because those people, Eve,
well, but it's,
they play pickleball out in Nanoose, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you know, I think we've got a bigger dialogue here.
yeah, but it's part of the city of Parksville. That's the problem.
I know it is. I know it is.
That whole notion of what is the city of Parksville, nobody came to us and said when they joined the city of Parksville, oh, we're gonna take out a little bit of Nanoose on you, because that was Nanoose before.
I know it was, and it
They
was
wanted
Area
to
G
join-
before.
They
I-
just joined
I
the
know
wall.
the history there. But you know, I think it would be worth sitting down with a map if we're willing to move forward, sitting down with a map and kind of going, well, what makes sense here for all 5 of us? And I wouldn't want to go to a large system. I'll leave it there, but we do need to, because I don't want this just to sit for another 3 years. If we've got a will to make some changes, let's get there.
Eve, did you have
Oh,
another?
Sorry.
Okay.
No, I think a map will be hard, because then you've got a boundary change, you've got more explanations to make.
And I just wanted to make one more comment that trustees can run in any area. I can run in Nanoose Bay next time, or I could run in Arrington. It's, you know, I don't live there, but it might be easier to get in up there. I don't know. Anyways, Peter, did you drop your hand? You're muted anyways. Yes, Julie.
Thanks. Yeah, I would like to see us somehow, somewhere, just move this conversation forward to see what it is we would be looking at. Maybe I oversimplified it. I just sort of thought everything that would be in the boundaries of Parksville would be one trustee, you know, so in terms of going on a ballot and everything, it would just make it so much simpler. But yeah, I have to admit, I get a little gray around where some of the area boundaries are, the RDN boundaries. So it would be worth, I would like to look at it a little closer.
Okay.
And my only comment again, at large versus, I guess technically a ward system is, I understand what you're saying, Carol, in terms of people can run anywhere and we do represent the whole district. Absolutely. I certainly understand that. The advantage is, for the most part, people from those regions, areas do tend to run, and they do have some really personal knowledge of that particular region. You know, I really, you know, Elaine, you know, passes on some of the information coming from Parksville Council. And I really appreciate that, because that's something she has an interest in outside, you know, just has further interest in, because that's her community, just as you have perhaps a little more interest in the Qualicum community. And just, it's just natural where you live, you have a little bit more personal interest, and the trustees would bring that to the table.
That's a lovely comment. One more comment on this, Ron, and then we are moving on.
Yes, please. Yeah, once you get to the decision of splitting G, it is a matter of looking at a map and just deciding where you want to draw that line, recognizing that that will feed into the electoral boundaries that goes to create the lists. So again, you will need to sit down, and I'm just quickly pulling up RDN's from RDN's website. G is kind of parceled out already. There's a section that sits between, well, French Creek sits between the two. There's a section that sort of sits between it and F. And then there's another parcel that sits on the west side of Parks, city of Parksville kind of thing. So you may be able to look at that and find some natural borders already when it comes to should the decision be made that says, okay, this area of G will go with the town of Qualicum and this area of G will go with the city of Parksville. I would sort of recommend that you stick within the boundaries of the city and the town, and then you just parcel out G, which is the shared area. But again, your call. But you will have, again, at the end of the day, you will need to sit down with a map in terms of saying, okay, here's where we would make the natural delineation.
Thanks, Ron. Elaine, and so what would you like to do with this, Elaine?
Well, it's not for me to decide. It's
No,
for the
but-
board to decide. What I'm hearing is that we've got an appetite to move it down the road. I don't know. I know the area G fairly well. Other people may not, but maybe we want to put out a public statement that we're thinking about this and we're gathering information. I don't know.
To me, it sounds like we have more further discussion amongst us as trustees as whether or not we're going to move ahead with this. I don't think it's, I don't know. I don't feel that it's at that point yet because we're not
Okay.
all in.
So do we then bring it back to the next policy meeting?
I would think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and I've got a couple of other things. Do you want me to raise them now or should I raise them at the next meeting?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. On page 5.7.1, the board evaluation. I think it states that that we actually do a board evaluation probably annually if I wrote it because I like that.
Yeah.
But in reality, we don't. And so we should adjust that. And I would suggest that once per term might be adequate. And it'd be really nice if we could do 2 per term, but we haven't been able to. So so that just needs a little bit of an adjustment.
Okay.
And the other thing is the trustee code of ethics, and I understand that Eve may have something to say about that. Or not.
Yeah, I'll say I'm pretty sure we've done at least 2 a term, one being a self-evaluation of the board and one being an in-person with a consultant hired. So I don't think it's quite accurate to say that we haven't done them in less than 4 years. And on the code of conduct piece and ethics and procedural type, having practical statements built into this bylaw. And we also revisited also in our handbook, the Ministry of Education and Childcare, along with BCSTA, will by the end of the month be releasing to districts a template with guiding statements. I think we're very close. We're really close. We could, it talks about how you go about reviews and how you do investigations and things like that. So it's to come. It's just not public yet. And so I think probably having a look at it and discussing it before changing the board bylaw 1, I would shift board bylaw 1 possibly till September and have a working session on just code of conduct and electoral areas as just separate. And then we can have formal statements or formal things to be included in the board bylaw 1 revision in the early fall.
Thank you. Noted. Ron, did you have a question? Your hand is still up. I think you do not. Peter?
Yeah, in regard to performance review for the board, I think that's a topic that we could put on our next agenda for our informal conversation. And I think what I would suggest is that there's some agreement amongst the board on our path so that we could use our time in our summer retreat or early meetings in September to action next steps and to say, okay, we're going to do this every year, and then we're going to do this other process, intermittently, whatever that may be, but get everybody on the same page as to what the path is.
Okay, that sounds good. Julie?
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to comment on one of the change. I think it's a positive change, and that was under fiscal, I think, accountability on the 8th. I think, you know, in a way, it's addressing some of my concerns from the previous tendering admin piece. And that was taking out that only projects in excess of an X amount of dollars comes to the board, and putting in major and minor capital projects come to the board. And I just wanted to say, I think that's a positive move.
Thank you. Elaine,
Yeah, just one more thing on the, when we look at the evaluation, BCSTA, I think all of us who were trustees, but I don't know where the heck I got this, published a book a few years ago, and I'm actually using it right now to prepare another board evaluation, and it's really good. So if people have copies of that, they might want to take a look at it. Unfortunately, I don't have it with me because I'm in the studio, but it's a coil bound book that's about 1/4 of an inch thick.
okay, thanks. Are there any other questions or comments on either of, or on any of the things that Elaine has brought forward? Seeing none, Elaine, your hand's up. All right, we're gonna move on. The sustainable practices, and Dr. Jory's going to.
Yes. Hello. So this is one that caught my eye as we were, scrolling through, and it's certainly a conversation that we've had frequently over the last year and a half that I've been with you. And in anticipation of work that we're intending to do with our inbound consultant, and also to, I think, align our practice more closely with our needs and the philosophy of the board. And so essentially what I noticed here is in guiding principles, item E, the language seemed a little soft to me. And what it said before was the encouragement of staff and students to be cognizant of energy use and material consumption. And I felt like that was maybe a good start, but certainly it was time to push a little bit more on that and up the level of responsibility and diligence around our power consumption and our material consumption in our sites. So rather than, this is a very simple change, rather than say encouragement, say it's an expectation. Rather than be aware of use, let's say, let's actively reduce it. Let's work on this. Let's put that language in place and say to our staff and to our students, no, we need to work, we need to try harder here. We need to actually have an impact. And so that's the first part. And then of course, what does that look like? Well, it kind of looks the same when you go through the requirements in the AP. But there's, as I mentioned earlier in the FinOps meeting, the for instances are maybe going to be a little vague to people. And so I've stated in here, this includes the closing of windows and doors when the HVAC is required, turning off of lights, and the removal of extraneous appliances as 3 examples of work that we could actively do in our schools to reduce our carbon use and ultimately power costs across the district. Now, we are going to come up with an actual energy plan. We will be working on this as a system. And so this is really one of the early steps, just to make it public and to increase our level of accountability around our behavior.
Thank you. Matt.
Okay, thanks, Carol. I fully support, this actively reduction piece, but I just want to highlight the realities of change, and I'll speak to how about composting and reduction of garbage. And so when that was introduced to schools, I'm not even sure where every school's at right now. It was like, what classroom used to have like 3 garbage cans. And then suddenly they had 1, and it went from a large size to a small size and so forth. But there was, again, like, this was just overnight. And so a teacher walked in the next day, and suddenly what had been practiced for 25 years is suddenly not practice. And so I guess I don't see a big issue with teachers following this. I just see the support necessary behind it, and being cognizant of how a classroom operates. I mean, if you're an art teacher in the primary grades and you use construction paper for multiple art projects for your students, what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing here is that I shouldn't be doing that anymore. So if I shouldn't be doing that anymore because that's waste, then what are some alternatives? And there will definitely need to be support for those alternatives, and it shouldn't be something that just happens overnight. And I just like, I don't think there's an issue. In fact, I 100% believe teachers want this. Teachers want to see the reductions, and they want to see this, but the supports need to be in place. You can't have garbage sitting in a classroom for a week, composting. So there needs to be solutions that help meet these targets. And it's just not, oh, let's just remove the garbage cans from the classroom and that check that box. And now you've left the teacher to try and figure out how to suddenly deal with all this. And I think I don't see anybody from the parents pack here, but anything that comes home with a student goes back with that student. Well, parents would want to know that as well. And so I don't see problems with recycling. The problem with recycling juice boxes has been the ants, has been the smell, and we're getting into heat now, and it's going to smell. And we don't have the facilities that are designed to recycle appropriately. I don't believe we do, or to collect it. So I just want to say that the cautionary tale is teachers are 100% on board, but let's please think about how that will be implemented moving forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Matt. Julie.
I'll go after Peter because I think he was going to respond to Matt, and then I'll go after him.
Okay, Peter.
Yeah, just to be clear, I mean, the original language is material consumption. I didn't want to tinker with that because there's an intent there. But it really wasn't the bent of this change to crack down on paper use in elementary art classes, or do something profoundly different than what we're at least trying to do in regard to recycling. Those are all things for us to think about and noble causes. For me, it's really about the carbon side of it. I mean, as a school district, perhaps we produce too much garbage, and we could work on that, but we have increased our power consumption dramatically in the last couple of years. And if we just get back to where we were 4 years ago, it's about $200,000 in savings and requisite reduction in the amount of carbon that's going out there. And what got me going on this, I'll just share my screen real quick. Actually had to do with my own household, and because it's really where it kind of got my attention. So you see this chart here at the bottom of the page, and I'm hovering over it. You can see the numbers popping up. Can you see that? Okay.
Yeah.
So this is just this last couple weeks, and the light blue is the power that we're using this year, and the dark blue is the power we're using last year. And so you can see that really not much difference on Thursday, April 20th, around 60 kilowatt hours. And then what happens is the sun comes out, okay? And you can see that the solar panels are starting to collect there. But over time, what I can also say is the solar panels only collect 3 to maybe 3.5 kilowatts on the sunniest day. That's their max. And there's a big difference here between this year and last year, sometimes twice that. And of course, if it's cloudy or rainy, the panels do nothing. The difference is really about being careful about power use in the house. Once again, closing the doors and the windows, being cognizant of about turning lights off, not running the television when there's nobody watching it. Those types of things have become a little bit more, well, frankly, obsessed about it, if you will. because it's charted, right? And it's the same thing with the school data. You know, you pay attention to it, you start to change your practice. Well, I've adopted that same mentality in my house now that I have this this BC Hydro interface, which is the entire intent of giving you the interface. They want you to use less power because it is a precious commodity, and so they've figured out that people like myself will start to act differently if that information's in front of them. My theory here, based on the information that Secretary Treasurer Amos has shared with me, is that our behavior has backslid in the last few years, partially due to lack of attention, but partially due to the encouragement of the Ministry of Education to open doors and windows during COVID. And so there's quite a bit of potential there to reduce those costs and that carbon use by going back to at least the previous levels of behavior that we had 3-4 years ago, and perhaps even a little bit more after that, especially with the help of our inbound consultant, as we get into some more sophisticated features like energy management with our HVAC system, you know, new lighting, or better insulated windows, those types of things that we discussed. So point is, it's not just about having the equipment in place. It's about what we do to manage ourselves day to day.
Thank you. Julie?
Okay, well, thanks both to Peter and Matt. Always good food for thought for me. I was just wanted to comment, I really appreciated the change of words, Peter. I think that was a really positive and good direction to go. And then my other one is just a very little one. It's just a typo. And that's right up under in the policy statement. There's an underscore between action and to.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Okay, moving on. Living wage, Mr. Jory, Dr. Jory.
Yeah, me again.
Hang on, are we moving this forward? What action are we taking?
Yes.
on this?
Sorry, yes. So
Yep, I'm okay.
Bring it upstairs.
Yep.
are we gonna do the vote? Do we do a vote or? No, okay, we're moving it
Consensus?
forward.
Okay, all right.
You
All right.
Living
Well,
wage,
Okay, living wage. As you probably recall, I brought this up a number of months ago, had a rousing discussion about it, and then last month tabled it. The request from a couple months ago was to see if there's a way to adapt it to make it still feasible in regard to staff following it. The thinking at the time was that it wasn't going to require a lot of change to make that happen. And I will confess that I was a little stuck, and my time away from the conversation allowed me to come back with fresh eyes. And I think I found it. I think I found the solution, and it really was very simple, I think. We'll see what you have to say about it. But simply put, this policy statement that I was struggling with is to ensure that staff providers and subcontractors are in fact following the living wage as per the living wage website and foundation. And I was stuck on the fact we couldn't do that. We didn't have the means in my mind, you know, to be that certain. And so literally changing this word from ensure to encourage made it work for me, because I believe that we can encourage. I believe that perhaps we should encourage, but it doesn't stick us with the obligation of watchdogging this to an extent that, you know, would hamper our business practices or potentially turn away service that we don't have another provider for. So it's just that change in the policy alone would make it work for me. And then in response to that, in the AP, where some of the details are, once again, simple. In 4B, work must last longer than, it used to say 1 continuous hour, and I changed it to 4. And that's not a perfect response, but what that did in my mind is shift it from, I mean, when we have when we have an event, we will use our local vendors to provide coffee, tea, food. And in my mind, we couldn't ask them to do that in 1 hour of work. It just wasn't possible. But 4 hours seemed like a reasonable amount of time that a local vendor could spend providing or preparing food for one of our events. And then so that would be allow that to carry on. And then item 7 was very problematic for me. And so looked at it, and then rather than modify it, that's the one part that I elected to remove. And if you recall the conversation from 2 months ago, we don't do audits. It's not a practice. And if we were to have a contractor doing work and they'd opened up a building, and then we discovered that the owner's nephew was pushing a broom and wasn't making the living wage, we would have been obligated, the way that it is stated here, that we would have to, potentially cancel the contract. It's literally what it says. That we'd be pushed into that conversation. I said, well, that's not what we're going to do. Once the job's underway, and we need them to finish. So I just deleted it, and I felt like the rest of this probably could be supported, and we would continue our current practice of including this as a preference in the tendering process. A simple declaration to be signed as part of the contract, and leaving it at that. So thoughts on that?
Julie?
Thanks for that, Peter, and thanks for putting the thought into it. I do find it a little amusing, because as much as I loved your word change in the previous document, this one jumped out at me. I couldn't support the change from ensure to encourage. And for one reason, I think it flies absolutely in the face of the motion that's still a live motion that we passed back in 2012. And that was that the Board of Education of School District 69 Qualicum establish and implement a living wage policy that is tied to the hourly rate established annually using the living wage for families, a calculation methodology, and that the living wage policy will apply to all school district employees, full-time, part-time, and casual, and all service providers and contractor staff. So to me, that is in contravention of that live motion. And B, the intent of what we were doing. I suppose I get what you're saying in terms of the vendor suppliers. I don't have a problem with changing it from 1 hour to 4 hours. I suppose one of my questions to you would be, did you talk to the people at Living Wage BC and maybe ask them, well, I have a concern around the auditing, in our present policy, we have an auditing process. I have a concern around that. What, do you have any recommendations? I'm just wondering if you were able to talk to them.
Do you want to respond, Peter, or?
Yeah, I remember now that you asked me to do that. I did not reach out to them. And I will go, I have to say that Julie, I'm a little surprised by your response, because at the particular time I raised this issue, I said, we are not able to do this. We are not doing this, and we are not able to do this as it stands. And so my push at the time was to actually rescind this entire policy. And so for me to change this word and you say, no, you're going to vote against that, that's really interesting, because I felt like this was a pretty significant compromise in order to keep this policy afloat as part of our policy manual. Reflecting the conversation of the time is like, this stuff is of value to us, but we recognize there's a pragmatic concern that is going to get in the way of the philosophical statement. So I'm a little flummoxed.
Oh, and I can appreciate that, Peter. And I guess because I would have been, I was under the impression that maybe you would have talked to the living wage people of BC, and they very well may have come back and said, you know what, Peter, you're absolutely right. Your concerns are really valid, and we don't have, a suggestion for you, or your suggestions are great, and we go with that. they're sort of the experts in the field. They've been dealing with all sorts of organizations, nonprofits, municipalities over this. And I just thought, well, they might have some input, and I wanted to hear what that input was. So, before I want to move, I would feel comfortable moving it forward. I would like to hear what their input is and see if they have some strategies to address some of your concerns. And maybe they have strategies to address my concerns. That's sort of where I'm at there.
Thank you, Julie. Matt, you have a comment or a question?
Yeah, it would just be a comment, and hopefully it doesn't come across cheeky, but I would always like to see a union line added in here if we could encourage, because most unions do offer living wages. And so I think all unions do. So that would guarantee that you'd be following that policy. Period. That's my only comment. Thanks.
Elaine,
Yeah, I appreciate your cheeky comment, Matt. I'm prepared to support this moving forward. I do hear, though, the concerns that Trustee Austin has raised, and I remember the last time, and I don't know whether it was in the policy meeting or whether it was in the policy prep meeting, but I remember asking Kevin, are you able to enforce this policy? Because we do not want policies on our books that are not enforceable. And he assured me that at that time, it wasn't a problem. So I'm still struggling a bit with this, but I am willing to move it forward because I think I think we need to move stuff forward, I guess. And it is just first reading. Philosophically, I think it's interesting that we're strengthening one policy and basically weakening another, but that's just the way it is, I guess. I don't know. Maybe I'm confused.
Eve.
Yeah, I'm going to support the changes to the policy and the AP. And although I think Living Wage BC may have some insight into some things, this is our policy. This is our policy for our district. And this is how I think we best express our ability to uphold the notion of a living wage. I don't think you can call us back, Julie, to 2012 when we passed the motion. I think we have fulfilled the motion. We have created a policy. At this point, we're discussing whether or not the policy meets what our expectations were or otherwise, but we have fulfilled the motion of 2012, and we are not contravening it, I believe, in any way. We are trying to update it to be more reasonable to our work or what we have on the ground. And I think Matt's comments are quite true. And we pay over the living wage. So it's a given. So I was on the side at the very part of this discussion that it's not necessary. And probably I'm still more in that camp than others, but I think if we want a living wage policy, this covers our ability to fulfill it, complete it, and makes a statement. I agree. It's nice to be able to make statements under these things politically. There aren't a whole lot of, I don't believe, and maybe Julie, you can do the homework, but I don't believe there's a lot of school districts that are on board with this within their policies. I think New West was the first and we followed them. City and town and things like that. I'm sure there's more people are not having in their policy manuals a living wage policy than are, and since we superseded anyway from a financial perspective, I think we're doing good work with what we say and the intention of being able to follow it as best we can. So I would suggest that it go forward to next reading. And I thought we had first reading, but I guess we postponed it. So I support going to first reading.
Thank you, Eve. Ron, you had a comment?
Just a comment. I'll be real quick, but again, recognizing the living wage has some guidelines out there. And I think to Peter's change, it is more reflective of what the intention of the guidelines is, because they do have language in here. And again, I'm emphasizing from ensure to encourage. They've got language in here to recognize small contracts, casual employment, small contracts. And I'll just read: casual and ad hoc employment of fewer than 120 hours of work per year can be exempted. recognizing that this is the living wages guidelines as opposed to what Eve said, your policy and what your intention is. I mean, I think your intention is to live within the guidelines of living wage. It's not a society, but anyways, the implications of the living wage folks, but it is your policy in the end. But recognizing that even the living wage folks recognize that there are exemptions to the rule. They talk about common examples include emergency repairs and maintenance work. Similarly, for large employers as applicable, small contracts can be exempted when the contract makes up no more than 0.5% of the employer's purchasing policy. So they recognize that there's little things that go on with employers that they can't control. So again, I don't think it's necessarily that thou shalt ensure certain things to happen, but it's more about we will encourage it, recognizing that even living wage knows that there's circumstances when you can't always apply it.
Thank you, Ron. That was really great information. So shall we move this forward then, or do we need to vote to see whether we're going to move it forward, or Eve?
I think, no, I think it thumbs up. I'm thumbs up to move it forward. I can do that.
Gary, are you going to move it forward?
Okay. So consensus, not quite, -1.
Okay, thank you. So that's going to move forward. So policies potentially going, this is number 5, policies potentially going to second reading. And I think all of these are, you're going to comment on, Ron. 106, financial reporting.
Let me just pull it up.
Thank you.
Oh, these people with 2 screens. I'm on my pad. I'm on
Well,
my-
I print off the current stuff. So yes, so financial, where are we at? Financial reporting, and yes, so it's really about the inclusion, recognizing that we're including new language around multi-year financial plans. So you're seeing that in bold and underlined, and they're asking for more information, or not more inclusion of First Nations into the process, not just doing it, but how are you going to do it? And again, so that there's recognition of the transparency with the public, including the First Nations. So that's what you're seeing before you. I think I made the comment last time that we've had policy on this already. It didn't include the multi-year planning. It didn't include the First Nations portion, and it also it was lacking, if you want, of the new standards of what the financial statements need to be prepared for when it comes to the appropriated surpluses. So that is now included in this. This has been vetted, if not written, by Saban in policy. He's, from the ministry's perspective, he's the one that's spearheading the changes for school districts to making sure that they are inclusive of the new rules and regulations. And so I said to him, I said, if you edit it, at least then I'm not going back and forth between what I think it should read versus what he may come back with. And so this is with his edits, his language that would effectively pass the standard of what they're asking for.
Thank
That's
you. Comments? Julie?
Hey, thanks, Ron. Can you just explain to me the on policy statement number 5 and budget's been struck out and expenses put in? Can you just explain
Yep.
why?
Yeah, absolutely. I know exactly where you're coming because it's more about the expenditures and not the revenues. To be honest, it's not about how much money you are finding, because if you had done it on the funding side, it wouldn't include, it may or may not include revenues. It may include surpluses. So they're trying to recognize as a thumbnail, and again, this is even what Ian Aaron of the funding department prefers, is the common language is expenditures versus budget, because budget implies possible use of surplus or the use of transferring of surpluses kind of thing, whereas expenditures is the known entity of that's how much money you are truly spending and will need to spend in order to cover it from appropriated surpluses that might be sitting on your books. So expenditures is truly reflective of how much money is a school district spending in any given year versus transferring in and out by way of revenue supports. Okay.
And if we won the lottery, we had a high degree of revenue, it wouldn't really maybe be a true number when you take a percentage of it.
Correct. Yeah, because many districts, like they're in our $50 million, again, recognizing that we've got 50 million about that we bylaw in any given year that includes special purpose and capital. It's not reflective of how much we're actually spending because of the use of, and some districts are moving up to $1.5 million to and from local capital, to and from operating surpluses kind of thing to balance their books in any given year, whereas expenditures are the true nature of the business of the board in any given year.
Thank you so much. Okay, any further questions? Seeing none, we're going to move on to B. 900, privacy management and accountability and APs, personal information management and access, privacy breach response, and privacy impact assessment. And that's to you again,
Can
Ron.
we go back to the previous one? We're moving that one forward.
Oh, yes,
Second reading, yeah,
yes.
everybody good with that?
Everybody okay? Barry? Thank you. Thanks for keeping me in line, Elaine. Appreciate it. Okay. Ron's getting himself organized.
I'm just getting some paperwork here. So yes, as I spoke to this one last time, this is about the new language or the new requirements that all public bodies, sorry, I'm getting the right terms here, that all public bodies must ascribe to. We've always had, and again, that's why you're getting an edit versus it's a new copy. We've always had privacy statements. We've always had FOIP requirements. And so we've always had language in terms of what people can do to request public information, what we do with the information we've got. So that's not the issue. What's new is the fact that we actually need a plan. We actually need a privacy program. As of getting my dates here, as of February 1st, I believe it was, a new administrative procedure from the ministry came into effect that we had to actually have a program in place that included additional content. And so that's what you're seeing added to this. That's why you're seeing 2 additional APs as attachments to this, as well as, because it now includes training of staff. It now includes, again, records retention has always been there. It includes better language in terms of what you have to do to report a breach, should there be a breach.
And it's a breach, not a beach. Sorry for the edit. It report privacy beaches. I don't think we have any.
Okay, I'm not sure where you're looking, but yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Beach
4F.
versus breach, yes. So those are the new inclusions. I'm just trying to think if there was something that they sent us here. The components of each, yeah, here we go. The components each public body is expected to include in their PMP or their privacy management program are designating a privacy contact person. We've always said that. Privacy impact assessments and information sharing agreements. We've always had that, but we've never really, it's been kind of the work of Leslie. And so now we're basically embedding, I always stumble, into the program itself. Privacy complaints and privacy breaches. Again, what do you do about it? Privacy awareness and education activities. And again, that includes keeping staff apprised of what they should do to protect private information, as well as what they should do should there be a breach and how to escalate it. Another component, making privacy practices and policies available. This is what we've always done. Informing service providers of privacy obligations. And again, we've always done that. That includes when we sign on new software vendors, kind of thing, understanding of what is the content that they're creating, and therefore should we be getting parents to sign off on certain educational curricula that we're offering through those vendors. We've always kind of done that. Now we need a program to basically pull it and tie it all together, and then continually monitoring and update that program as time goes on. So this is really about creating that program, adding additional, if you want, bricks to the program that we might have been either not documenting or doing off the side of a desk. Now we're basically formalizing what we do and being a little bit more accountable to the public in how we present it. The next step to all of this, obviously, is a web page that we'll start working on that will include links to some of the things that we're doing, links to policy, links to people in terms of how to escalate issues, and just steps in terms of what can and is being done in the background. That's the lens.
Thank you, Ron. Questions, Elaine?
Yeah, just a heads up on this one. I know that we looked at it, was one of the last policies we looked at, actually, so it hasn't been all that long. We'll probably have to look at it again in a few years, because we may want to change some of the details in how we store things and how long we keep things and all of that stuff, and how much we charge for everything. So this is one that, you know, it really does need a look fairly often, and fairly often, there's been a lot of iterations of this policy, and the last time we put a few policies together and created one, and now it's getting bigger and bigger again. So, you know, it's just one of those things, but it will be one that we'll have to look at again, probably toward the end of this term.
And there's certainly ultimately it's about what's working and what isn't. What are we getting out there? What are we finding from our staff, kind of thing, particularly when it comes to the training elements. Again, not AP driven, but some of it may have a flavor for AP going forward. But yes, definitely this is the first step in responding to the FIPA changes as of, and now I'm looking at it, February 1, 2023 FIPA changes.
Thank you. Julie?
Hi, thanks. Yeah, basically I was gonna say what Elaine was saying, and it's more in the details. Where do we get, I've asked this question before, but I will, where do we get some of these figures, these time frames that we're using in here, 20 years, 6 years, 2 years, permanent? Where is that coming from someplace generally? And then I have another question.
Yeah, it's at the top of the sheet, BC Reg.
I thought I had seen it, but then I couldn't find it again.
Yeah, this is all, we can't change the fees and we can't change the time frame of holding anything. It's BC Reg 155 done in 2012, OC 5 none.
Okay,
You know,
well,
we can't
because
fiddle
we
with
are,
those.
okay, well, I guess my comment is, because we are changing things like the student records, the student information data, that's being recognized, you know, that we have a different system now, right? MyEd BC, and to Elaine's point, that'll probably change again as technology changes. So we are sort of changing things, and yeah, there's some things in here that are kind of outdated, and that's why I'm asking, is that the kind of thing we can take out or not? You know, things like dot matrix copies or something. Are we still doing that? You know, floppy disks. Are we still doing that? It just seems outdated and superfluous. And can't we take those things out? Or maybe there's maybe we still do deal with floppy disks. I don't know. Maybe we still do deal with a dot matrix. I don't know.
I know we looked at this the last time, and we did a kind of a deep dive into what we could change and what we couldn't change, and this is the results. So it's been done recently, but I can't recall exactly. It was a number of different trails we followed. So, but yeah, it'll change again.
Yeah, it's not a biggie for me. I just sort of think, well, that's silly to have all this other stuff.
Well,
Thank you.
where are you
Wait.
seeing floppy disks? And
I
again,
don't see floppy disks anywhere. I'm trying to find what you're talking about. I don't see.
like I see general ledger, I see invoices. So I guess the answer to is many of these things fall within statutes that we, to E's point, of statutes that we are given. They're the student records. And we've got obviously School Act that we have to follow in some of those areas. We've got protection of privacy, things that we have to follow. We've got CRA rules that obviously that manage, or not manage, but it conducts the rules of what we keep on a financial basis. So I think we try to get rid of what is the definition and how these things are stored. The question really becomes, how long do we store them? And you try to pull it away from, is it on paper or is it on a floppy disk? And it's really the intent of how do you ascertain how long the data needs to be stored, not necessarily what the form of the data is.
Yeah, no, that's fine. It's just that, yeah, it's come up. It was Appendix 3, by the way. But, and it is, BC reg, but when you're cleaning things up, you kind of go, well, let's clean it up, but we can leave it.
Eve.
Yeah, I mean, in the case of the student records, it's 2 of the most recent years of progress reports or the official transcript, and then you have to hold on to it for 55 years. That's, what we have to do.
Okay. Seeing no more comments or questions, is everybody willing to move forward? I see you, Elaine. Barry? Okay, thank you. So that'll be moved forward. Number 6, policies potentially going to 3rd and final reading. There are none. Number 7, future topics. Yes, Matt.
Yeah, hi, everyone. I've been asked to bring this discussion to this table, and so I'm doing that. And it's regarding policy, and I've checked in with BCTF and a few other folks, and so I just want to know people's thoughts on this, and I'm not sure where it would go in terms of policy, or if it should be policy yet. I'm not 100% convinced on it myself, although there are pieces of it that should be there. So basically, I've been asked to present whether we should be putting a policy in for transgender students on field trips, and how non-binary and so forth, and if we should have a statement somewhere in our policy that would provide direction for a teacher who is presented with a transgender student. So initially, it is, I would say, well, I think I would leave it up to the transgender student, but I guess there's been a situation where the transgender student doesn't have close connections with anyone that's on a particular field trip, and what are some possibilities, the concerns would be over the students that they are staying with or not. I don't have to get into the detail of this, but anyways, I was asked to bring this forward, and so I'm bringing it forward to this group, and I haven't yet found excuse me, I haven't yet found a spot that maybe under field trips that the statement would be. I don't have a polished statement yet either, but I wanted to bring this to your attention, and if it's something that we could look at doing as a future topic. Thanks.
Thank you, Matt. Mr. Jory.
Hey, Matt, can we talk about that one a little offline? I'd like to know where this is coming from and see if we can find a place to have a conversation or mitigate the concerns that your members are coming up with. Initial response to that through request through policy is that we would now be calling out or singling out individuals, and I'm not sure that's going to be helpful. So let's talk more, and we'll see where we might take this conversation next if there's a place to take it.
Thank you. Eve,
Yeah, sort of on the same lines of Peter and Matt. I'm kind of surprised though that you wouldn't have some guidance from BCTF, because TF has been a pretty powerful lead in the area of orientation and sexual orientation, gender identity, being very, strong advocates, resource leaders, finders, creators. And so I'm, maybe you're not far enough down the path in your own work with this. And yeah, it's got some sticky points for sure that you'd want to get right. But I'm surprised that BCTF wouldn't have something that can help schools. This is a big picture stuff here, I think. But not knowing where it would land, be it policy, I'm not thinking that way. I'm thinking more of the really what is the resourcing that and the thinking that the BCTF has done, because they've spent many, many, many years advocating, for, under these topics, to understand that kind of a situation if it happened to come up, kind of thing. A what if? That's, I know we've all looked to BCTF for some of this history work, resources, materials, and things like that. So just a comment.
thank you so much, Elaine.
Yeah, a few things. Thanks, Eve, for that thought. I think the TF has gone in a slightly different direction than we have in our board policy, and a lot of that has to do with, I guess, my influence a bit, is I would see it as coming under the safe schools stuff. I think that schools need to be safe for everyone. And that certainly includes people who identify as gender fluid, trans, queer, any of the other alphabet letters that you want to use. So you might want to look at that. And the TF might be a resource for you. I mean, Eve's right, going back to the 80s with the TF. The other thing that because I can't remember if I said it here, it might have been just on an email. I've been watching a series lately on the history of the gay and lesbian movement in the United States right from the 50s right through. I haven't watched the 2020 piece yet. And it's called Pride. And there are a lot of trans people who identify as transgender, a lot of their voices on that program. So if you can stream it, I'm sure it's streamable. I've, of course, got it on the old TV set, but it's really, really a good documentary. It's not the same process and history that we've had in Canada, but it certainly gives people a window into what the struggles have been like. So that's my little advertisement. But yeah, take a look under the safe schools, whatever we called it, safe caring. I think I wanted compassionate and other people didn't, whatever it's called.
Safe and fair.
Barry.
Yeah, San Francisco in the 50s, eh? Anyway, I would just, for curiosity, look at some boards like Vancouver, bigger boards, and see how they've dealt with this issue and see if they've done anything. I mean, not that I need to copy, but it just, as a direction going forward. It's nice to look at other boards' policies, see if they've taken that.
I can do that. Matt.
Yeah, no, thanks for those comments, folks. I did reach out to the BCTF, and they basically, wanted just to say, is there any intention? What is the intention for assigning rooms of transgen? And it didn't sound to me that they had any sort of concrete sort of language around it. You know, and their suggestion really is it's really up to the person first. And then outside of that, it's then, so it's up to the person that makes them feel comfortable, but is there, I don't know how, you know, it's, there's still people that are uncomfortable and parents and you know, I think students, when you have friends, they're your friends and you are accepted as that. And I think it's a little bit easier, but if we are moving forward, this is more just a discussion that I feel is important to have. And that, and I totally appreciate this having a side with Peter on this, but I thought it would be open to have this, you know, I'm not looking for a solution tomorrow type of thing. But I do believe, I guess I've watched, if you want to watch something, Elaine, it was called Trans Hood. I don't know if you've seen that on Netflix, but that was a pretty interesting series. And so, you know, I'm trying to educate myself as well on these types of policies. So I just thought it was important to bring this to light and to have folks walk away and think about it. And maybe there needs to be a policy, or maybe there doesn't need to be a policy. Because I don't, sometimes I'm not sure if you want to lock someone into an exact, if you say, yes, you're going to, you know, go with what this policy says, it has to be, you know, operational. Yeah, it has to be, you have to be able to do it. And you don't want to then lock someone into a situation where they're going to be comfortable. So it could be probably a pretty broad statement, but the BCTF said, what is their intention and is there a statement? And so I have not, I apologize. I've not sat down and actually gone through all policy to see where it would fit, but I just thought today would just be the day to bring that forward.
Well,
So
thank
thanks
you.
for everybody listening.
I thank you. I appreciate you bringing it forward. Julie.
Yeah, no, I think anytime we have an opportunity for discussion and learning is good opportunity. And I think this is one of them. And I think we can really, you know, learn a lot from our neighbors, from the BC Human Rights Commission. There was a speaker I was listening to this weekend from the Anti-Hate Canada Network. And those are all wonderful resources for us because this is actually a live issue. It's coming up in school districts all across the country. And so there's lots of people sort of talking about it, which is great. Doesn't mean that there's a solution. I think one of the things, though, right off the jumping board, is people keep confusing sexual orientation with gender identity, and they're not the same, you know. And that sort of tying into some of these issues, and you know, it's different. You know, remove the one from the other. So thanks for bringing it forward. I think it'll be great discussion and great learning for all of us.
Thank you. Eve, and then we're moving on.
So Matt, just so I think trying to hone it in, when you said field trips, this isn't just general field trips. This is kind of like overnights overseas over a period of time where different things could be imposed on a student that may not feel safe in that. It's simply because of some of the logistics maybe. And
Yeah.
So I get where you're coming from now a bit more clearly to think that, yeah, safe and caring schools talks about our kids in our schools and, you know, on site bricks and mortar. It isn't taking it out to, you know, you're on EF tours and I want a single room because I'm trans, you know, that kind of declaration, maybe not land.
Actually,
You're in
that's the
Tribune
problem.
Bay. You're in Tribune Bay on a grade 7 and 6
tent.
field trip, and you're told you have to tent with,
Yep.
you know,
Absolutely.
the gender you identify with, but you know that's going to raise some eyebrows, I think. And so I just felt it'd be good to,
Yeah.
that's exactly what I was talking about, was those type of overnight stays.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, thank you. Seeing Peter and I are on the policy committee. If you have a side conversation with Peter about it, we'll see if there's something that we can do moving forward. And I thank you so much, Matt, for bringing that to our attention. So that's future topics. Are there any other future topics? Seeing none, I'm going to adjourn the meeting at 2:36 PM. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming. This was a great meeting. Thanks for
Thanks,
y'all.
everybody. Sorry I was late. Thank you.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Carol.
Thanks, Carol. So five recommendations going to the RBM.
Yeah.
5 of them, yep.
Right.
Yep.
Thanks. Bye.